Some exciting news. These vaccines for COVID seem to get closer and closer to finally getting in our arm, right? There's some questions that arise in terms of whether we can morally receive these vaccines. So I wanted to give some clarification in this regard. Kind of an exciting opportunity to tap into some of my scientific background. Because what the issue at hand is that in different ways, aborted cell lines have been utilized to bring this vaccine about. What this means is that in many cases, a long time ago, a cell was taken from aborted fetus and then put in the right environment, and then it continues to divide for even like 40, 50 years. Now, it's not necessary to use abortifacted fetuses to do this, but they have. And so how does this look in terms of our own participation or cooperation? So there's a principle in ethics called cooperation. It speaks about what we are permitted to do when we cooperate with evil. So I want to explain this. Not only is it valuable for these vaccines, but it's valuable just for our own thinking about moral situations. So cooperation can be distinguished, first of all, into two categories. One is what's called formal cooperation, where we actually have the intention of doing the evil thing and we help bring it about. When this happens, we're morally culpable for the sin, meaning we have a participation, we're guilty also to some degree or completely of that evil thing that takes place. Material cooperation is when we don't want to be involved. We don't have the intention to be involved. That's where we're usually at, because we wouldn't want, to use like these cell lines for vaccines that aren't moral. So let's look then deeper at this sense of cooperation, of material cooperation. It can sometimes be immediate or essential, meaning that what we do actually allows the activity to come about. For example, maybe your family member or your friend wants to get an abortion and you don't want them to. You try to talk them out of it, but in the end you actually help pay for the abortion because they don't have much money. Well, that actually paying for it is a cooperation, and probably something you could say that is essential. Like, it's needed to be able to do that. And so then you too would be participating in that sin of abortion because of your cooperation with it. But not all cooperation is that close or that immediate. Sometimes it becomes what's called like more remote, immediate, meaning that this cooperation is kind of a long ways away, and we're just cooperating in a very small way. An example of this might be buying things from stores. Sometimes stores will donate money to certain causes, and some of these causes are bad, right? We could return to abortion, that some give money to Planned Parenthood, which is an abortion provider. So when you shop at that store, some of your money in one sense actually goes towards that. So it might be noble to say, I'm not going to shop at those stores. But I think one could say that it would be morally permissible to do so, that there's such a remote connection that it's just not very strong, not very essential, meaning that it doesn't help really bring this about in a very direct or significant way. So this is the whole sense of cooperation. So how does this then apply to these vaccines? Well, we're actually quite fortunate because the two main vaccines that are coming down the pike here, that are probably going to be used, at least from my understanding, which would be the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccines, they actually were not derived from abortifacted fetus cell lines. So we're in the clear in this regard. However, they were there was some sense in terms of doing testing on a cell line that was tainted in this way. But because it was just kind of some of the testing process, it would make the cooperation much more remote. It'd be a little bit more of an issue if one of the vaccines that were to be used actually was derived from a fetal cell line. And I'm aware that at least one, if not more, of these vaccines are like this. And so if that's the case, then one would have to look like how closer is one participating? Certainly one wouldn't have the intention of that, so it wouldn't be formal. But by receiving a vaccine, does it somehow aid in the use or the killing of this innocent child and the exploitation of them? You could argue some, but I think for the most part it's really quite remote. So you might have a certain moral obligation to object, to say, I don't want to receive this vaccine because it was done. I will receive it because of the common good and this type of a thing, but in the future don't use these cell lines. We might be able to say it in that type of a way. It would make sense to choose a vaccine that is legitimately taken from good sources, that doesn't use or involved in evil things. So hopefully that gives you some assurance that these two main vaccines that seem to be kind of almost in our lap, Moderna and the Pfizer, really are pretty clear of any kind of ethical issues. But it's good to always be aware of such things so that we don't cooperate in evil and we always do the good. Have a beautiful, blessed day.